Welcome to the archive. And on each episode of the podcast, we sit down with a special guest who is either a founder, a builder, or a dreamer in the Arweave ecosystem and the promo web at large. And on this particular episode of the podcast, we're going to sit down with Tate Berenbaum, founder and CEO of Community Labs. He has been building in the ecosystem for a very long time, and I'm excited to get into a conversation with him today. With no further ado, let's jump right into the conversation. Hi, Tate. Nice to have you here on the Archive podcast. Before we jump in, I just want to say thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today. The idea here is we talk about different topics in the ecosystem, talk a little bit about your story for anyone who would like to hear that. So, to get started, can you just give us a quick intro about yourself?
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for having me, Murdy. My name's Tate, founder and CEO of Community Labs. Community Labs is a software development company and venture studio building out and bootstrapping the Arweave ecosystem, AO, and also the permaweb.
Yeah, nice intro. And so for people who know you and for those who don't know you, how did you get here? Tell us a bit about that. Where did you come from? How did you get into the RF ecosystem up until this point?
Totally. Yeah. Completely by accident is the short answer. But the longer answer is I'm from a relatively small town in Virginia. I grew up, been writing code for the last 10 years. In 2017, kind of fell in love with crypto. I was frying computers in my house to mine Bitcoin. Not very many either. And I was also using a browser called Brave. And for those of you who don't know, the Brave browser is interesting because you can earn you can earn crypto for like clicking on ads. And I got served an ad about permanent data storage in 2019 and just found the concept to be interesting. I ended up clicking on it and it took me to Arweave. And that was really the first time I had come across it before. My first use case of Arweave was actually uploading biology study guides that were banned from my school in Virginia. And I wanted to upload them to a place that they could never be taken down and I would be able to share with all of my friends. So I was in high school. I was a junior in high school at the time, and that was my first use case of Arweave. And ever since, I've been building on the permaweb just because I found that the concepts behind permanent data storage are immensely intriguing and also like shockingly boundless. You know, it was created in 2017 by Sam Williams to help archive newspaper clippings. And now we're using it to build a decentralized supercomputer on top called AO. So I'm really along for the ride because there's a lot of, green field to explore, and a huge number of product opportunities in relation to that.
Interesting. I think going back to that time when you come across this ad, like what was the sentiment at the beginning? Like, are you like, oh, what's this exciting tech? Or you're like, maybe this is something I'll just keep at the back of my mind and I'll explore that later. Like, what was your first impression?
Yeah. So for me as a kid growing up and being an engineer, I was always looking for ways to build things for free. Because I didn't have a reliable source of income. I was like living in my basement. I didn't have a job. I was going to school. And so I was always interested in things that, wouldn't charge me money. Or if it was going to charge me, I wouldn't have to pay some type of subscription because I couldn't rely on having that stream of income. So I was always looking for ways to get like free cloud access. I was looking for ways to get, free software, not having to pay for like the Adobe suite and stuff like that. And Arweave was interesting to me because I believe the ad said something along the lines of pay once and store forever for data storage. And for me at the time, that immediately clicked. I was like, oh, that's interesting because I don't know of a single cloud service that exists that actually enables me to store data for free in an unlimited quantity, at least for free over time after you pay to store it that first time. So that was really what led me to click on it immediately. And yeah, to your question, I didn't have a use case in mind immediately, but I knew that data storage concept would be something, useful later on down the line. So I never forgot about it. And then sure enough, maybe a month and a half later, I found my first use case doing, storing those banned study guides. Yeah.
Interesting. And so, going back to that, so you click on this ad, you go down the rabbit hole, and like what after probably storing the data you stored, what came on after that? Like, did you forget about it, and you're like, maybe there is something here, a sort of opportunity to do more with this permanent storage?
Yeah. So let's see. The immediate so developers like to feel powerful. Any tools that exist in the world that make developers feel powerful tend to do well, because developers like to have control over their environment and feel like they're able to build anything they can think of. And for me, Arweave did that. To be able to upload data, or really to be able to interact with like a blockchain network in JavaScript and upload any type of arbitrary data in like 3 lines of code, that was like a mind-blowing moment for me. I had never seen something so easy. I didn't even think it was that easy to upload data to a Web 2 cloud, inside of like a code base compared to something like Arweave for Web 3. So that was immediately like, whoa, okay, there's something here that's really powerful. I feel powerful when I use this. And now there's like a version of this link that's never going to break, and I can use this forever. So, immediately after uploading those study guides, the student body that I was sharing the study guides with also, were very excited about that. And I continued thinking about things to build on it. I thought back to, I had recently come across what's known as a JavaScript runtime. Really, it's like a version, a flavor of JavaScript that was created by Ryan Dahl, who founded Node.js. That new JavaScript runtime was called Dino. And Dino had this really interesting thing where you could import other people's code or your own from like a link. So instead of saying like, you have to like download a package and then import the package that you downloaded inside of your code, you could literally just write like import https://github.com/ whatever the code base is. And I was getting into that at the time as well, because that felt pretty neat, pretty powerful. But one of the biggest pain points with all the developers that were adopting that method of importing code inside of Dino was GitHub links were changing, they were breaking, they were getting rate limited. At first people thought it was really cool that like the code base could automatically update if you just update what the link resolves to. But what we realized was that actually breaks other people's code without you having to change. Like if you're importing someone else's code and they change that code, your code could break and you didn't change anything. So it became immediately apparent shortly after I had uploaded those biology study guides that this other problem existed for people that were trying to use Dino. And they needed a place to store their code where they could rely on it never changing or going down or being inaccessible for one reason or another. And that's what led to me building the first, I think, to my knowledge, the first module registry, codebase repository for Dino on top of Arweave. And that was maybe, a few weeks after those biology study guides were first uploaded.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah. I think I could see like the where the pain came from. Like, hey, I'm using this module, and then someone could just arbitrarily change something, and it breaks like the code I've been working on. It's quite frustrating. I've sort of like been in almost the same position where like that pain comes in. When you're trying to like get some code from the internet, and out of nowhere like some stuff has changed and all that. And I think the biggest issue for me is there is probably no way to like go back to the version you knew. It's quite hard apart from like modules, npm modules. So yeah, kind of understand that. So yeah, the story goes from uploading some biology studies to uploading these modules on the internet. And I think from what I've seen out there, you sort of created a community around that. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's right. When we first built that product, it was myself and two other people that I had known on Discord for a few years, that were also engineers that were also interested in Dino. We built that product to solve our own problem, and I decided to share it with the Dino community, and start just DMing people that were publishing their modules on GitHub and posting about it inside of the Dino Discord. And I reached out and be like, hey, look, like we have this tool that'll solve all of these problems, and it's totally free to use, and it's like easy, it's like one line of code to integrate it. And what we found was that people loved it. It was super easy to adopt, so everyone adopted it. There was a time when this product had more more modules used, like using it than Dino's own official version of the module registry themselves. So it kind of took the world by storm. It was completely on accident. We really just stumbled into it. And the other cool thing about developer communities is that if you have a developer community around a product, um, a dynamic begins to happen where developers themselves will come up with new ideas to make the product better, and then they'll just build them and open like a pull request in your code base. And so you'll log in one morning and be like, oh man, this product just got even better because some random guy that used this had this idea to improve it, and just made the change. So we really quickly built a community because people started contributing to it to make it better and better and better. And all of it was just completely organic, usage, built on top of Arweave. And really, Arweave was like the only technology that could really solve that problem. So that was one of the cool. Looking back on that, at least, it really leaned into one of Arweave's biggest superpowers, and was able to find success doing that.
Yeah, interesting. I think on my end, it was a little bit different. Like when I came across Arweave, I think it was during a live peer hackathon. And then I was trying to like have this sort of live streaming on my app as well as people uploading their existing videos. And I just realized quickly I couldn't store that on chain directly, let's say on Ethereum or Polygon. And I started like diving deep in different technologies. And then I came across Arweave, and it was one of the few projects that were focusing on storage at that time. But back then, the documentation and everything was almost not there, at least from what I searched. And I just decided to like give up on everything until I came across Nader posted one. He reposted an article, I think from, I can't remember from where, but I remember the title was "Teenager Founder Raises $30 million to Build Crypto Startup," and I just like went deep into that. I saw it was about Arweave, and I saw it was you. Sent you a message. We jumped on a call. I think, yeah, we jumped on a call just, I think, a 10-20 minute call. But then I'm just trying to connect the dots here. How do you go from just building stuff on your own, like this nest.land, to this point where you're raising millions and millions of dollars to build on Arif? Like, what went through between those 2 points there?
Yeah. The short answer to that question is we just kept building. We kept going down the path. Pretty shortly after we built Nest.land, we kind of wound up in a position where we were looking around, and we realized no one else was really building, in the direction, in the way that we were, in this, at the speed we were going, with the worldview that we had. It became very clear immediately that we were going down a path that really no one else had gone down before. And for me, like I said, like that's what I get excited about. So that was really fun. And you know, shortly after Nest.land came out and started growing, Arweave's first implementation of smart contracts was released. It was called Arweave, and we ended up building the first decentralized exchange on top of that. That enabled me to meet Sam, the founder of Arweave. Sam connected me to what are now some of our first investors. And again, I was like a teenager living in my basement. So when these investors would hop on the phone with me and ask me how much I was trying to raise, my answer was like, we don't really need money. I just wanted to meet you because I have no living expenses. Like I work for free because I enjoy it. And I thought that was a terrible answer to that question. But what I came to learn afterwards was that, you know, it's very rare for them to find people wanting to meet them and not ask for money. So I developed relationships with investors that way, and continued building out businesses on top of Arweave. Um, the biggest one that still is our number one product, and also perhaps the one that cemented our position in the ecosystem even before we raised for Community Labs, was Wander. And Wander came from a pain point that our developer team was experiencing when we were trying to support people that were coming into Arweave to use our exchange. People were used to logging in with something like MetaMask on Ethereum. And when they realized that the only way to log into apps on Arweave was to drag and drop their private key into the app itself, people were super concerned immediately that there were a huge number of like, what happens if you drag and drop your private key onto an application that's actually malicious? It would just drain your funds, right? There's nothing you can do about that. So a lot of people were coming into our Discord and were expressing that frustration. They're like, why are you doing it this way? And finally, we made the mistake of putting one of our engineers, and my co-founder Martin, on customer support. And Martin is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. From an engineering perspective, he is capable of building anything that he can think of, in a speed that is no one can really compete with. But one thing that he really doesn't enjoy is customer service and helping people understand things in the way that he did them. So he was getting really frustrated by people that were like logging into Verdo, the exchange, and being upset by that. So he left. He completely logged off for a weekend. We didn't hear from him, and then on Monday morning logged back in and got me on the phone and showed me the first version of like the MetaMask for Arweave, which was called RConnect at the time. It's now called Wander. And we decided to roll that out. We released it that very next week. Pretty much everyone in the ecosystem adopted it immediately because it was the first solution to that problem. And really across everything else, every decision that we've made, Martin's decision to build that was really the biggest reason why we were able to go to investors and pitch that we're building the consensus of Arweave, because we had already built the product that was integrated into literally every single Arweave app at the time. We decided to raise for the consensus of Arweave rather than just sticking to the wallet and the exchange, because we continued identifying so many product opportunities and business opportunities inside of the ecosystem. And we were also developing systems to make it very fast to go 0 to 1 on execution from a standpoint of taking advantage of those opportunities. One of our biggest problems at the time was actually maintaining talent. We had, and I would definitely think we still have, some of the best people in the industry on our team. And one of the challenges that we ran into in relation to having those people was keeping them. In a world where there is so much opportunity, and that opportunity is like constantly in your face, and we're figuring out how to cut up the pie to take advantage of it. It was really difficult to convince people to stay with us and keep building towards the mission, because there were opportunities left and right. There was no reason for someone to stay and work for someone else when they could start something of their own, have more opportunity for upside, and more ownership of what they're doing. So we decided to build community labs as the consensus for Arweave, really because instead of fighting the problem of finding great talent and retaining the talent, we wanted to lean into that and say, how can we actually just help these people start businesses for themselves with all of this opportunity rather than fighting that like headwind that we were facing? How do we lean into it? And that's what I went to investors with. Basically, the pitch was we've built these products, we know how to build quickly, we care about security, we care about user experience, and we have all these ideas. But in order to take advantage of them, we need to be able to fund these ideas. And really, that was the impetus for starting what's now Community Labs.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's an interesting journey there. Just going back to something you said there, I think one of the reasons actually at the beginning I stayed in the community was just seeing someone who was like kind of my age mate doing things in the community. And that was like, oh, wait a minute. I think I could find a place here. So I think kudos to you for that. And then hearing about the whole journey, how things went, it just brings a question of how has the journey been so far. I think it's been 5-6 years that you're in the Arif ecosystem, or maybe more.
Yeah. Um, it has both been the hardest journey and also the most fulfilling journey of my life, frankly. Um, I This was not in the plans for me. I didn't anticipate winding up with this life in this position. I went to school with every intention of going to college. My dream was actually to go to Stanford, um, and I wanted to get a job at Apple, and I wanted to work at Apple in California, and then maybe start a company in my 30s. Um, but that all kind of fell to the wayside, um, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think that it's been incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging. We've been faced with some really wild situations. When you actually, as like a, frankly, like I still consider myself a kid. Like when I raise money, and when I first had that, when we started getting capital for people and getting people to put their money where their mouth was from a standpoint of belief in what we were doing, my worldview had to change really fast, because I was no longer thinking about how to sustain myself as an individual. The game became how to sustain the team. How do you sustain the balance sheet? How do you learn investor relations? How do you learn go to market? How do you learn hiring? How do you learn legal operations, finance? Like all of the things that I had no idea even really existed. All of a sudden, I had to become as much of an expert in as I possibly could to give community labs the greatest chance of success. Um, and that was really hard. It is really hard. It's by far the hardest thing I've ever attempted to do, and I don't know if I'm doing it right. I think that I've been in this for 5 years now, and I believe that we're on the right track. Of course, I've made so many mistakes along the way, but I still think that there's an incredible opportunity here, and a number of ways to take advantage of that opportunity. Um, so, I would say it's been incredibly difficult, but I don't regret it. And I feel like there's no better way to learn yourself than by trying to build something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, interesting. I think as you've just mentioned, it's been a very hard journey and probably very challenging. And so the question is, what has kept you motivated about the whole of Arweave, the whole ecosystem? What has kept you pushing that hard during hard times?
Yeah. You know, one of the hardest lessons to learn in the beginning was, people say that they want things of you, And they say that they want better marketing. They say that they want better communication, better, go to market, better distribution. But what they really want is the price to go up. They want the price of the asset that they bet on to go up. And one of the biggest challenges there was recognizing that even if you went to them with a really what you felt to be a brilliant plan that could make that happen, people might not get excited about it until you actually just make it happen. So the amount that you have to rely on yourself and not rely on the belief of others for creating the results that you believe to be possible was like a huge learning curve for me. Um, I think that despite it being as difficult as it was, one of the reasons why I'm still here is because I still see that possibility. I still see that world, and it's becoming clearer and clearer by the day. And the more people that begin to naysay or begin to disbelieve what we believe, um, the more it just makes me want to take advantage of it. The more it makes me want to capture it, and to prove that to prove that that idea is not necessarily correct and that there is something here. Um, I think that there's some sort of fulfillment that I can get from sticking my neck out, um, that I don't know is a healthy thing, but at least feels to me like it's the greatest opportunity to make a change. Um, because the greatest changes I don't think are obvious until they're viewed in hindsight. Um, and we have one of the greatest opportunities to make that change with a technology that no one else is really competing with right now materially. So I believe in it for that reason. And the final half of my answer there is, despite all of what people are saying about the price going down, a lot of metrics are actually going up that people really aren't paying much attention to. Um, there are multiple teams right now that are like chomping at the bit to compete with what Arweave has created. Teams that have raised a very large amount of money that are now trying to build versions of Arweave better than what they think Arweave can be. Um, and at the same time, the public is talking about there being a lack of market opportunity altogether. How is that possible if all of these people are competing for this market that we are winning at? There's something there. The other thing is like the usage metrics and the use cases. Of course, people are going to shut down. Businesses are going to shut down. Venture odds, like it's like one or two out of every 100 things succeed. I don't know why people are surprised that things aren't working out in an ecosystem. They can't expect everything to succeed. Look at the game theory of like venture scale economics. It just, these things are very standard. What we're seeing is standard, but we're also seeing people catastrophize the things that are standard. And so for me, from an insight perspective, I'm just looking at that and I'm like, okay, if you're willing to discount the price of this asset because of something that you believe is a catastrophe that I'm looking at metrics for and is actually just normal, give me every opportunity to take advantage of that, because it's clear that like we see something that other people don't. Not to suggest that things are without their problems and that there aren't a million reasons why everything could fail tomorrow, but you can say that about anything. So that was a long and winding answer to your question, but my belief in it is multifaceted. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, interesting. I think touching a bit on that, especially lately that people have been speculating a lot. I think like the data doesn't lie, as people say. These days, like I think compared to like 2 3 years ago, the usage of Arweave is just going up. Like it keeps going up, regardless of the price. The actual usage keeps going up. And the one thing I like about most people who are actually doing things in the ecosystem, they they're looking at it from like I think a novel perspective where we're trying to do something that goes beyond just the price. People and from the examples I've seen from like everyone, people are just saying, "Hey, I think I'm here because I just want to see like that story of humanity going down 100, 200, 300 years down the line." And other people are like, "Hey, as long as I can upload this one picture and my grandchildren will see that, I'm just happy with it, and I'm happy to like build with everyone else who wants to build." And yeah, it's been interesting seeing people with that belief, even in times where like other people are speculating. So yeah, moving forward, now that you're running community labs, I'm just curious, what's the vision for like community labs, or where is community labs heading in like in that perspective?
Yeah. So we're going through a really transformative phase right now as an organization, and the reason for that is because the the way to win the game for us is changing. It's not what it was when we first got started. What I mean by that is when we first got started, the whole goal was to find as much talent as possible and build as many businesses as possible that have the greatest chance of success as possible. Plant as many seeds as we can, basically, within reason, high conviction seeds. And in order to do that, we spent a lot of time building out a playbook to find the talent, to go 0 to 1 on these businesses. Um, we created an entire operating model: ideate, validate, build, launch, and scale. So we have phases for each product inside of the company. They all went through that same operating model, and now they're out there. Like they're mostly spun out and self-sufficient for the most part. And what we need to do now in order to win is to help them win. The game for us doesn't look like continuing to bet on new businesses. While the market conditions are what they are, while things are quiet, the highest leverage thing we can do with our time is actually just double down on the things that we believe in, and help them be successful. So for the next period of CL, the next chapter of CL's life, the game is how do we help these seeds grow into trees? And what are the things that we can do, the ways that we can help that happen in the meantime? It probably looks like a little bit less engineering, and it probably looks like a little bit less incubation. Um, but it also looks like way more focus on top of funnel, way more focus on growing community, and way more focus on helping bootstrap distribution for the different products that we had invested in.
Interesting. And I think that actually makes sense to an extent. Like you start by planting seeds, then helping grow these trees. And I can tell the dedication that has gone through this, as someone who went through how was it called? I think you called it the success of Open Web Foundry.
Oh, AO Ventures.
AO Ventures, yeah. Where I was working at that time, the product went through AO Ventures, and I could tell that the dedication from the organizers and everyone who participated. It was an exciting time, and it was also exciting to see some project get out of that, and they're now growing their like fully fledged product in the ecosystem. It's very interesting to see. Also touching a little bit on community. Like, what do you think about the community in general, especially now that I think there is a lot of diversion in the community? So, like, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Murdy. Well, one thing I can say is I'm extremely grateful that you're still a part of it, because I think that you're one of the few people that can really see through the noise, and that means a lot. One thing that's exciting to me about that concept is that I don't think you're alone. I think there are a lot of people that are not just looking at the price, they're looking at the fundamental utility of the asset and are willing to take a bet that the world is going to see that for one reason or another at some point in the future, and that they should be excited about it and building on it in the meantime, so that they're there to take advantage of the opportunity when the time comes. Um, I also think there's a huge number of people that are incredibly unhappy with everything. And, you know, there are always reasons to be unhappy. I think that, let's see, what the phrase is something along the lines of like, uh, oh gosh, I want to say it's something like comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of people are looking what other people and other ecosystems are doing right now, and they're like, why aren't we doing that? What are we doing wrong? The market is like, not appreciating the work that's going in. Something must be wrong. And it's been hard, right? Like a lot of things have been going wrong, candidly. I think that there are a lot of things that we can do better and that we are improving. However, I'm not too worried. I think that, you know, the people that were here 5 years ago, for the most part, are still here. They're still betting. They're still believing in the potential that's there. And we had an opportunity. 12 months ago, if you're thinking about it strictly from an investment perspective, 12 months ago, um, this thing was like 10 times its value. And in a time when everything else was going down. Looking back on that, if you wanted to take advantage of that opportunity, you could. A year before that, or maybe 2 years before that, it was double the price of what I'm saying it was last year. Like there have been many opportunities to exit and to get out. And the market's going to do what the market's going to do. Things are going to go up, things are going to go down. And of course, everyone's going to be unhappy when it goes down because it's down. But that doesn't mean that it can't go up again. And that also doesn't mean that it hasn't gone up in the past. This is not investment advice. Do not buy Arweave as a result of this conversation. Just looking strictly at what's happened in the past. Maybe it continues going down and maybe I'm totally wrong. But who knows? I'm still here, and I know a lot of other people that are too.
Yeah, interesting. And I think it's in hard time that you see people who are really like into the community in general, like people who are excited beyond prices going down. Because when it's a bull market, everyone is excited because generally everyone's pockets are excited as well. So it's so I think they always say like bad markets really test people in a sense, and you can tell who is really like grounded to a certain level. And I'm excited about Arif because if you look at that trajectory, people who are building like way back, most of them are still building for the biggest part, and it just shows that there is something much bigger than just prices going up and down. And yeah, I think that's really exciting. And kudos to everyone who's still out there building, being in the community. And I think this leads me to the video you shared recently, I think 2 3 days ago. I watched that a couple of times, and I could just tell, I don't know, and you can comment on this, but from what the sentiment from the video was, I think somewhat of I don't want to call it disappointment, but like recognizing that probably some things didn't go as planned. But then there is also that light of we can still do something different. Like the opportunity is there. You missed one opportunity, and there are like 100 more coming. And also, as you just said, everything could still go wrong, but you're betting on things getting right over time. That's what I got from that. I don't know if you can share something about that video.
Sure. Yeah, I thought long and hard on whether or not I should publish that. Um, and the reason was because I am publicly admitting a mistake. and it was not a small mistake. It was a $40 million mistake. Um, I think that there are a number of takeaways for me, at least. One of the biggest was, I think that we're approaching a time in the world where honesty is going to be valued higher than controversy. And I think that it's been a while since that's been the case. I published that video to test that theory because it was a massive mistake and a lot of people would have a reason to be upset with me about it. But one thing that, it can't be faulted for is being dishonest. It is as honest as it gets. Um, so from that perspective, I wanted to take that risk to see how it would play out. And as of now, I'm happy to say that the reception has been, for the most part, overwhelmingly positive. It's really shocked me. I didn't realize like Twitter could be so receptive to someone admitting vulnerability. Usually the grounds are pretty hostile around here, but that wasn't the case, and I'm really thankful for that. I'm also not particularly demotivated by the outcome. For us, the bet was pretty calculated. It turned out not to play in our favor, but the truth of the matter was we had an opportunity to more than 10x the asset value of something on our balance sheet within a year and a half of the company being formed. um, and while in retrospect it would have been nice to take that opportunity, um, I think that if we're able to find that opportunity within a year and a half of the company, chances are we've done it once, we can do it again. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what that's going to be. But we certainly have ideas, and we certainly are running tests, and we're certainly going to figure it out, because we made it this far. So I'm, coming out of that, I don't want the takeaway to be purely disappointment. For me, the takeaway is actually nothing but excitement, because people didn't react to it nearly as negatively as I was bracing for them to.
Yeah, I think first of all, I appreciate you putting that out. Um, we need more honesty. I think just as you said, out there, like especially on Twitter, it's not every day you scroll and you see someone being honest about a mistake they did and they admit it publicly. So I appreciate you for that. And also, I think when I first watched the video, I was thinking, it's a sort of marketing thing. Like it's going to end like, hey, so now we're announcing this next thing. And I had to watch it a couple of times. Like, did I miss something? Like, was this really all like just someone sharing something publicly? Like, as that was as honest as it could get. And yeah, it was exciting to watch that. And I think uh, those types of those types of video just get to people directly, like not trying to be gimmick or something like that. And yeah, I appreciate that.
100%. Thank you. Yeah.
So I think this just prompts me to add another question. As someone who I think after watching that video especially, you're someone who is taking like bets on long-term things, not just short-term. And it would prompt me to the question, how do you probably see Arweave in 20, 50 years? Like, what are your sort of projections in that regards?
Mm. Yeah. So,
And yeah, sorry to cut you off. And I think this question is a bit vague, could go different ways. So I think I'm more I'm asking the question from a perspective of like the tech itself in terms of like adoption, like preserving humanity, like the history of humanity and all that data. I'm also asking in terms of Arweave and the whole ecosystem evolving just away, not away from Arweave, but building on top, like things you're probably excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I don't know if you've ever read the book Foundation by Isaac Asimov. Is that familiar to you?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I can't say I have either, in total honesty. But there's a really good TV show about it on Apple TV. And what it's about is it's about this guy that creates this this device that can basically predict the future. He figures out a way to condense all of reality and all of humanity into this algorithm that can then be used to play out over time to see what would happen in the future. And the idea, this concept becomes sort of a new religion, or at least there's a phase of it that becomes a new religion called the Foundation. And these travelers go to a new planet and colonize a new planet to create the first foundation, the first version of society that they think is future proof compared to everything else that's happening in the universe at the time. And the show has, I think, 3 seasons now inside of it on Apple TV. But in that first season, the people get to the new planet, and there are these periods of really, really dark times called crises that they go through. And the algorithm predicts that there's like crisis one at this time, crisis two at that time. And the crises nearly like destroy everything that was created by the settlers, by the Foundation. But they narrowly survive and move on to become even bigger and prosperous. There were multiple crises that the Foundation goes throughout the show, and the reason I bring this up is because my sense is that the ideals and the ideology that Arweave stands on and the technology that it stands on is sort of like the first Foundation. And we are on this new planet and we're going through our first crisis right now. And it's really doing damage. We're at a pretty weak spot. A lot of people are having a hard time. Sentiment is down. A lot of belief is being questioned. And not everyone makes it through. People decide to desert, and that's going to happen inevitably. But where I see it going from here is what people rarely talk about in relation to the awful times is that there is no better way to build trust with someone else than by going through something like that together. And my true belief is that we're going to come out of this way stronger than we went into it as. And I think in 20 to 50 years, our foundation will be far larger than it ever was, even, when it was at its peak from a market perspective a few years ago. That's the future that we're gunning towards, and what that looks like from an adoption standpoint, why I'm so excited about it, and why I also believe that metaphor kind of tracks is, AI is inevitable, right? We're moving towards this world where jobs are getting replaced, algorithms are becoming incredibly powerful, and we're thinking about intelligence in terms of energy for the first time as opposed to brain power, right? And in order to keep that in check, really, how do you keep it in check? Should be the question. A lot of people are thinking about this right now. My take on it is that Arweave is the only place you can actually track it. The only way to hold something like that accountable that is digital is to store logs of it in a place that it could never delete or ever get to. So if you do believe that AI is like the future of our civilization, or has a significant part in whatever the future of the civilization that we live in today looks like, Arweave solves this problem for it that literally nothing else in the world can solve. Like, what are we doing? I think that from an excitement standpoint, I get pretty excited about that angle, because that's one of those things where it's just like this is very clear. It's very clear that the world's going this way, and that something's bad is going to happen in one way or another, and this is the way to prevent that or to solve it. So I'm excited from that perspective. I'm also excited from the perspective of what AO stands to offer to people. I think that across everything in crypto right now, there isn't really a tool that exists that is a truly generalized, decentralized computer. There is a marked difference between Web 2 and Web 3 because it infers the way that you interact with the two things are different. And AO kind of blurs the line between those two things for the very first time. And more importantly, enables you to do a lot of stuff you would do in Web 2 in a Web 3 environment in a more efficient way, with more rights to their users, with more guarantees to the people that are building and deploying the applications, and in a way that is cheaper, that has the potential to actually beat the cloud from a standpoint of cost for the first time ever. And right now, like, people are upset because, like, we've got some issues in relation to the execution of that vision, but it's not like it's a small vision to execute on. So as I look forward to the future and the way I see the world playing out, those are a couple of the narratives and the angles that I can really see as being potential to drive a huge amount of impact for our ecosystem and, more importantly, for society. But I'm curious. I don't think these are things that are discussed very often. Like, what's your take on it, Murdy? Do you see that, or can you play devil's advocate?
Yeah, I think that like at a point where everything is still early, that most people don't really realize like the big picture. Another thing that I could add on that is probably I'm excited about things like the UDL, like, and how that like comes in play, right? Where like, hey, if I have this data that I can probably that I'd put on Arweave, set my own rules, and then have these sort of UIs bend to my rules as opposed to like me bending to their rules. It's just very exciting, and I think this could actually, to a certain extent, blend in with things like the X402 protocol. Like, hey, if I have my data that is on Arweave, it has UDL on it, and I'm like, hey, probably to access my data, you need to pay this one-time fee. If an agent, and bring it back to AI, like AI, it crawls the internet by default. So if Arweave becomes this sort of like main source of data as a data lake, and AI can just try to like find data there, there is an opportunity to monetize for everyone who has some sort of data on Arweave. And like there are so many things that you can build on top of that that I don't think people realize now, even in the ecosystem, that I think I'm excited to see how they play out in the long term, 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. So yeah, I think there is there are many interesting technologies being built right now that are going to be very, very exciting down the line, and people will realize like, oh, actually this was interesting, but we didn't realize that back then. Yeah, I'm really excited.
100%. That realization of like, oh man, that's really cool. Why didn't I appreciate that a few years ago? I get that all the time, and I still have that about Arweave. So I totally can relate to what you're saying there. And yeah, I think again it kind of signifies like, what better place to be than a place that makes you feel stupid because of all the potential and all of the opportunity that feels like it slaps you in the face sometime.
Yeah, totally. And I think just one example that is probably not related to all this, but so I've been going back and forth with my dad. So we have lost sort of, I think like 60, 70% of the pictures of like the family back then, like three generations above and all that. So he's really someone who wants to keep that for like generations to come. Because even sometimes I get to ask him questions like, hey, how did like your dad look like? And he has to struggle to like show me a picture like that. So he was asking me about finding a way to like keep everything in a sense that it can be like even our grandchildren can see that. I never got to talk to him about Arweave, but like I've already started uploading some of that data to Arweave, and I'm like, I'm excited about a future where this is just a go-to solution for like those people without them having the need to think about like web 2 web 3, because I think we on like crypto Twitter, we are the people, or Twitter in general, we are the people like trying to make the nuances about all these stuffs, but then everyone out there, they just want something useful. And I'm kind of like, I'm excited to see probably like when I show that to him at some point, he's like, oh, this is cool. So this can live 200 years. Like, I'm excited to see his reaction to that. So yeah, that was just something in parentheses that I wanted to like share in that regard.
Appreciate that. Yeah, 100%. I've had similar conversations with my family too, for sure.
Yeah, nice. So moving forward, as I think we're getting to that 1 hour mark, I just wanted to ask, this is out of curiosity. I've seen lately you have this sort of like short tweets that you just put out there almost every day, and they're sort of like, if XYZ, then Arweave is this other thing. So like, are those sort of like thoughts just, they just come to your mind, you tweet them out? Are they like shower thoughts as they call them? Like, yeah, what's the idea behind, like how do they come around?
Yeah. So that's sort of another test that I wanted to run actually. The motivation behind that is one of the common criticisms that we have for Arweave is that it doesn't have enough mind share. And the question from my mind went to, well, how do you actually create mind share? How do you add to that so that you can kind of solve that problem for one, but for two, and more importantly, when people are presented with problems, they're more likely to subconsciously or consciously realize like, oh, Arweave might like solve that problem. And something I've been really interested in is like studying human psychology. I never went to college, but one of the things that I probably would have loved to take classes on if I did was psychology. And the reason I find it interesting is because it turns a science, like the idea of humans and how humans think and interact with other people into a science. And the idea behind it is, well, if you can just get the word Arweave in front of people with logic preceding it as many times as possible, how many repetitions does it take for someone to actually start realizing it and thinking about it? So it starts subconsciously, where once a day you just see me tweeting about Arweave on your feed. But hopefully, after maybe 7 tweets, 7 days worth of tweets, if you see them, you'll start thinking about it more. That's the hunch, right? And I hope that other people are willing to join me in trying that as well. Maybe we can fill up the feed with like genuine content about why Arweave is meaningful for the world. But that's the test that we're running, and these ideas are coming from a number of sources. A lot of it is stemming from me directly, but I've also been talking to the team. We're trying to schedule this stuff out so that we can really reliably run it as much as possible. I also ran it for most of August, I believe. It was either August or September, once a day, every single day. And the metrics on our socials, on my socials, actually outperformed everything else that we had been running as a result of those tests. So that was some validation that, like, okay, even if this mindshare thesis isn't necessarily playing out the way we think it might, numbers are still going up regardless. So there's little reason to not justify continuing to do it. That's the hunch, at least.
Interesting, and I love the fact that you're approaching that from like an informative perspective as opposed to like prices and all that. So I guess for someone like coming across that, they they'll see the value first of the technology before anything else. And I think 2 or 3 days ago, I was in one of the permaweb discords, and someone was trying to upload their articles like on their RNS, and this person was sort of like mind blown when they started like telling him about Arweave, like, hey, if you upload your stuffs, they're there on, like, they're on the permaweb. Regardless, you can even decide to have a different UI accessing the same data and displaying that. And yeah, that person was like genuinely mind blown. And yeah, it was fun to watch. Like someone just get to that realization that, oh, wait a minute, there is something here that is like very exciting. And it's, to be honest, something probably has never been done before. And yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think like it's helpful to identify those like magic moments when we realize how cool something is so that we can try and spread that with other people. Um, there are so many stories of witnessing that myself, and it also is probably one of the reasons that I still love the technology so much, because there's so many ways you can experience like, whoa, like this is really meaningful, and nothing else is really doing this in the way that this is solving these problems. um, that's super cool that it's still happening.
Yeah, totally. Um, Probably one last question. I've seen lately like the efforts towards I think I'll call it education in a sense, where like I saw the new arif.com site and some like extra effort in that sense. Like, can you talk a bit about that? I wanted to ask a bit.
Totally. Yeah. So we got super lucky. Someone made a huge mistake and listed the domain arweave.com on the domain market for something that is incredibly, incredibly cheap. um, and we bought it immediately. We sniped it. I'm super thankful that that happened because, you know, for SEO purposes, being able to own that domain, I think there's a huge amount of value behind. But the strategy there is basically what it like if we're going to be running these marketing tests to figure out how we can drive more people to Arweave, we need to have as much control over what, you know, what people are landing on as possible. And we also want to have a website that we can start running tests on to say, like, do people react better when they find this framing in the first few words of text that you read on the website versus this? And a lot of that has to do with, you know, just figuring out what people respond to better, figuring out how we can improve the messaging, how we can improve the narrative so that Arweave can stick with more people. That's really the first angle there. The second angle for the education and the materials is, number one, for people that are interested in it, how can we actually help them to onboard in as streamlined of a way as possible? And number two, how can we be putting out more and more content that is informative and is educational so that we have a greater shot at being picked up by large language models, we have a greater shot at being picked up by search engines, and we start getting traffic from those referral sources as well, rather than just people discovering it on Twitter. So we're running some tests there too, but all of it, like we're rejigging the entire organization right now to just be super laser focused on like getting this right so that we can really crack the top of funnel awareness loop for Arweave itself. And arweave.com is really like the first step in that process that we're going down the path of. And that's why we're pushing to it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think I'm glad that you guys are running through like those type of experimenting with some stuffs. Then I actually saw, I can't remember when it was, I think like a month ago. For some reason, someone was asking Grok about something, then Grok pointed at Arif, and that was exciting to watch. And I think putting like a lot more data out there just gives a chance to like be picked up by these LLMs, as you just mentioned.
100%. Yeah. LLM optimization, I think, is probably the future of SEO. So the earlier we can be in on it, the better our odds are at winning in it.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I think we're coming to the end of this chat. Anything you want to talk about last? Any CTA, something, any alpha coming from community labs or something?
There are some pretty big shifts that we're going to be doing on the radar for the future. I can't say too much right now, but definitely watch out for Wander Pools. That'll be shipping super quickly. And we'll be excited because that'll make it super easy for anyone to just like rent out their spare hard drive space and contribute it to the Arweave network. So pumped for that. That'll be coming out in the next few weeks at the very latest. Um, Aside from that, I would just say thank you, Murdy. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, especially in a time like now. It just really means a lot. And yeah, I'm worried I talked too much, but I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity, and it's always great to catch up.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the chat. It's been an exciting hour. I didn't even see time moving. I think we've touched on different stuffs, and it would be kind of interesting to probably come back to these 10, 20 years later and see like some sort of like predictions how they turned out. So yeah, this has been really exciting, and I'll make sure we have this probably deployed on Arweave just so that it's there. I think Arweave is the right to be remembered, and this moment has to be remembered for generations down the line. And I like this type of things just because we can like reference back, like, hey, maybe we've come from this one point to this point. We're right about this, wrong about these other things. So yeah, thank you very much for making the time to talk to us on the archive. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Murdy. Hope we get to talk again soon.